Chapter 13. Norman knew they were coming. Even before he saw them driving in, he didn't know who they'd be, or what they looked like, or even how many of them would come. Oh, but he knew they were coming. He'd known it ever since last night when he lay in bed and listened to the stranger pounding on the door. He had stayed very quiet, not even getting up to peek through the upstairs window. In fact, he'd even put his head under the covers while he waited for the stranger to go away. Finally, he did leave. It was lucky that Mother was locked in the fruit cellar. Lucky for him, lucky for hers, lucky for the stranger. But he'd known then that this wouldn't be the end of it, and it wasn't. This afternoon, when he was down at the swamp again cleaning up, Sheriff Chambers had driven in. It gave Norman quite a start, seeing the sheriff again. After all these years, he remembered him very well, from the time of the nightmare. That's the way Norman always thought about Uncle Joe Considine, and the poison and everything. It had been a long, long nightmare from the moment he phoned the sheriff until months afterwards, when they let him out of the hospital to come back here to the house once more. Seeing Sheriff Chambers now was like having the same nightmare all over. But people do have the same nightmare again and again. And the important thing to remember was that Norman had fooled the sheriff the first time, when everything had been much harder. This time it should be even easier if we remember to be calm. It should be, and it was. He answered all the questions. He gave the sheriff the keys. He let him search the house alone. That was even funny in a way, letting the sheriff go up to the house and search while Norman stayed down at the edge of the swamp and finished smoothing out all the footprints. It was funny, that is, as long as Mother kept quiet. If she thought Norman was down there in the cellar, if she cried out and made a sound, then there'd be real trouble. But she wouldn't do that. She'd been warned. And besides, the sheriff wasn't even looking for Mother. He thought she was dead and buried. How he fooled him the first time. Yes, and he fooled him just as easily again, because the sheriff came back and he had noticed a thing. He asked Norman some more questions about the girl in Albergast and going to Chicago. Norman was tempted to invent a little more, maybe even say that the girl had mentioned staying in a certain hotel up there, but on second thought he realized it wouldn't be wise. It was better to just stick to what he had already made up. The sheriff believed that. He almost apologized before he went away, so that part was settled. But Norman knew there'd be more. Sheriff Chambers hadn't come out here just on his own initiative. He wasn't following up any hunch. He couldn't be, because he hadn't known anything. His phone call yesterday was the tip-off. It meant somebody else knew about Albergast and the girl. They got Sheriff Chambers to call. They sent the stranger out here last night to snoop. They sent the sheriff out today, and the next step would be to come out themselves. It was inevitable. Inevitable. When Norman thought about that, his heart started up again. He wanted to do all sorts of crazy things. Run away, go down into the cellar and put his head in Mother's lap, go upstairs and pull the covers back over his head. But none of this would help. He couldn't run away and leave Mother, and he couldn't risk taking her with him now, not in her condition. He couldn't even go to her for comfort or advice. Up until last week, that's just what he would have done. But he didn't trust her anymore. Couldn't trust her after what had happened. And pulling the covers over his head wouldn't help. If they came here again, he'd have to face them. That was the only sensible solution. Just face them. Stick to his story, and nothing would happen. But meanwhile, he had to do something about the way his heart pounded. He sat there in the office all alone. Alabama had pulled out early this morning, and Illinois had left right after lunch. There were no new customers. It was beginning to cloud up again, and if the storm came, he needn't inspect any business this evening. So one drink wouldn't hurt, not if it made his heart calm down again. Norman found a bottle in the cubbyhole under the counter. It was the second bottle of the 3 he put there over a month ago. That wasn't bad, just the second bottle. Drinking the first one had gone him into all this trouble, but it wasn't happening that way again. Oh, not now, when he could be sure Mother was safely out of the way. In a little while, when it got dark, he'd see about fixing her some dinner. Maybe tonight they could talk, but right now he needed his drink. These thinks. The first didn't really help, but the second did the trick. He was quite relaxed now. Quite relaxed. He could even take a third one if he wanted to. And then he wanted to very much because he saw the car drive in. It had nothing to distinguish it from any other car. No out-of-state license or anything like that. But Norman knew right away that they were here. When you're a psychic sensitive, you can feel the vibrations. And you can feel your heart pound. So you gulped the drink and watched them get out of the car. The man was ordinary looking, and for the moment Norman wondered if he hadn't made a mistake. But then he saw the girl. He saw the girl, and he tilted the bottle up, tilted it up to take a hasty swallow and to hide her face at the same time, because it was the girl. She come back out of the swamp. No, she couldn't. That wasn't the answer. It couldn't be. Look at her again. Now in the light, her hair wasn't the same color at all. Really, it was brownish blonde, and she wasn't as heavy, but she looked enough like the girl to be her sister. Yes, of course, this must be who she is, and it explained everything. This Jane Wilson, or whatever her real name was, had run away with that money. The detective came after her, and now her sister. That was the answer. He knew what Mother would do in cases like this, but thank God he never have to run that risk again. All he had to do was stick to his story and they go away. Just remember, nobody could find anything. Nobody could prove anything. And there was nothing to worry about, not that he knew what to expect. The liquor had helped. It helped him to stand patiently behind the counter while he waited for them to come in. He could see them talking together outside the office, and that didn't bother him. He could see the dark clouds coming on out of the west, and that didn't bother him either. He saw the sky darken as the sun surrendered its splendor. The sun surrendered its splendor. Why, it was like poetry. He was a poet. Norman smiled. He was many things, if they only knew. But they didn't know, and they wouldn't know. And right now he was just a fat, middle-aged motel proprietor who blinked up at a pair of them as they came in and said, "Oh, hi, can I help you?" The man came up to the counter. Norman braced himself for the first question, then blinked again when the man didn't ask it. Instead, he was saying, "Could we have a room, please?" Norman nodded, unable to answer. Had he made a mistake? But no. Now that girl was stepping forward, and she was the sister, no doubt about it. "Yes. Would you like to—" No, that's not necessary. We're anxious to get into some clean clothes." It was a lie. Their clothing was fresh. But Norman smiled. "All right, it's $10 double. If you'll just sign here and pay me now." He pushed the register forward. The man hesitated for a moment, then scribbled. Norman had long practice when it came to reading names upside down. Mr. and Mrs. Sam Wright, Independence, Montana. That was another lie. Wright was wrong. Filthy, stupid liars. They thought they were so clever coming here and trying to pull their tricks on him. Well, they see. The girl was staring at the register now, not at the name the man had written, but at another one up at the top of the page. Her sister's name, Jane Wilson, or whatever it was. She didn't think he noticed when she squeezed the man's arm, but he did. "I'll give you number 1, Norman said. "Where is that?" the girl asked. "Down at the end." How about number 6? Number 6, Norman remembered now. He written it down as he always did after each signature. Number 6 has been the room he'd given the sister, of course. She noticed that. Number 6 is up at the end, he said, but you wouldn't want that. The fan's broken. Oh, we won't need a fan. Storm's coming up. It'll cool off in a hurry. Liar. Besides, 6 is our lucky number. We were married on the 6th of this month. Dirty, filthy, liar, Norman shrugged. All right, he said. And it was all right, now that he thought it over. It was even better than all right, because if that's the way these liars were going to play, if they were going to come out with any questions but just sneak around, then number 6 was ideal. He didn't have to worry about them finding anything in there, and he could keep an eye on them. Yes, he can keep an eye on them. Perfect. So he took the key and he escorted them next door to number 6. It was only a few steps, but already the wind had come up, and it felt chilly there in the twilight. He unlocked the unit while the man brought out a bag. One ridiculous little bag, all the way from Independence. Oh, you nasty fucking rotten liars. He opened the door and then stepped in. Will there be anything else? He asked. No, we're all right now, thank you. Norman closed the door. He went back to the office and took another drink. A congratulatory drink. This was going to be even easier than he dreamed. It was going to be as easy as pie. Then he tilted the license in its frame and stared through the crack into the bathroom of number 6. They weren't occupying it, of course. They were in the bedroom beyond, but he could hear them moving around, and once in a while he caught muffled phrases of their conversation. The two of them were searching for something. What it was, he couldn't imagine. Judging for what he overheard, they were even sure themselves. Help if we knew what we were looking for, the man's voice, and then the girl's. Anything happened, there'd be something he overlooked. I'm sure of it. Crime laboratories you read about, always little clues. Man's voice again. But we're not detectives. I still think better to talk to him. Come right out, frighten him into admitting. Norman smiled. They weren't going to frighten him into anything, any more than they were going to find anything. He'd been over the room thoroughly from top to bottom. There were no telltale signs of what had happened, not the tiniest stain of blood, not a single hair. Her voice coming closer now. Understand? If we only could find something to go on, then we'd be able to scare him so that he talked. She was walking into the bathroom now, and he was following her. With any kind of evidence at all, we could make the sheriff come out. The state police do that kind of laboratory work, don't they? He was standing in the doorway of the bathroom, watching her as she examined the sink. Look how clean everything is. I tell you, we better talk to him. It's our only chance. She had stepped out of Norman's field of vision. She was looking into the shower stall now. He could hear the curtain swishing back. That little bitch. She was just like her sister. She had to go into the shower. Well, let her. Let her be damned. Not a sign. Norman wanted to laugh out loud. Of course there wasn't a sign. He waited for her to step out of the shower stall, but she didn't reappear. Instead, he heard a sudden thumping noise. What are you doing? It was the man who asked the question, but Norman echoed it. What was she doing? Just reaching around and back here beside the stall. You never know, Sam looked. I found something! She was standing in front of the mirror again, holding something in her hand. What was it? What had the little bitch found? Sam, it's an earring! It's one of Mary's earrings! Are you sure? No, it couldn't be the other earring. It couldn't be... Of course it's one of hers. I ought to know. I gave them to her myself for her birthday last year. There's a custom jeweler who runs a little hole-in-the-wall shop in Dallas. He specializes in making up individual pieces, just like the one of the kind you know. I had him do them for her. She thought it was terribly extravagant of me, but she loved them. He was holding the earring under the light now, staring at it as she spoke. She must have knocked it off when she was taking her shower, and it fell over in back of the stall, unless something else happened. Sam, what's the matter? I'm afraid something did happen, Lila. Do you see this? Looks to me like dried blood. Oh, no. Yes, Lila, you're right. The bitch. They were all bitches. Listen to her now. Sam, we've got to get into that house. We got to do something. That's a job for the sheriff. He wouldn't believe us even if we showed him this. He'd say she fell, bumped her head in the shower, something like that. Maybe she did. Do you really believe that, Sam? Do you? No, he sighed. I don't. But it still isn't proof that Bates had anything to do with it, whatever did happen here. It's up to the sheriff to find out more. But he won't do anything. I know he won't. We have to have something that would really convince him, something from the house. I know we could find something there. Oh, no, it's too dangerous. Then let's find Bates, show him this to him. Maybe we can make him talk. Yes, and maybe we can't. And if he's involved, do you think he's just going to break down and confess? The smartest thing to do is go and get the sheriff right now. What if Bates is suspicious? If he sees us leave, he might run away. He doesn't suspect us, Lila, but if you're worried, we could just put through a call. The phone is in the office. He'd hear us. Lila paused for a moment. Listen, Sam. Let me go after the sheriff. You stay here and talk to Bates and accuse him. Certainly not. Just go in and talk to him while I leave. Tell him I'm running into town to go to the drugstore. Tell him anything, just so he doesn't get alarmed and stays put. Then we can be sure of things. Well, give me the earring, Sam. The voice faded because they were going back into the other room. The voice faded, but the words remained. The man was staying here while she went and got the sheriff. That's the way it was going to be, and he couldn't stop her. If Mother was here, she'd stop her. She stopped them both, but Mother wasn't here. She was locked up in the fruit cellar. Yes, and if that little bitch showed the sheriff the blood earring, he'd come back and look for Mother. Even if he didn't find her in the cellar, he might get an idea. For 20 years now, he hadn't even dreamed the truth, but he might now. He might do one thing Norman had always been afraid he'd do. He might find out what really happened the night Uncle Joe Constantine died. There was more sounds coming from next door. Norman adjusted the license frame hastily. He reached for the bottle again, but there was no time to take another drink, not now, because he could hear the door slam. They were coming out of number 6. She was going to the car, and he was walking in here. He turned to face the man, wondering what he was going to say. But even more, he was wondering what the sheriff would do. The sheriff could go up to Fairville Cemetery and open Mother's grave, and when he opened it, when he saw that the empty coffin, then he'd know the real secret. He'd know that Mom was alive. There was a pounding in Norman's chest, a pounding that was drowned out by the first rumble of thunder as the man opened the door and came in.